Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider Series, where I interview top practitioners in the CVC world and learn with you the best practices and golden nuggets that they have accumulated over their career. In this episode, we will be learning from Barbara Berger, president of Chevron Tech Ventures. Barbara, could you take a few minutes to share your story and how you got to where you are today?
Thank you for the invitation to speak. And, the way I describe myself, I'm a middle child of a large family. And so that comes out in a lot of things I do. My parents were community builders. So everything they did was about building community. They were always adding people to their lives, and dad is gone, but mom is still doing that. One of them is a planner, mom, and dad was always adding stuff to his plate, including the day he had a stroke. He just had a lot of unfinished work. So I am the product of that DNA. And a three-coaster. So I grew up in the East Coast, went to the West Coast for school and started working for Chevron at that point. And as they say in Houston, I am on my second rodeo on this coast, tying it to Chevron and then into corporate venture. I studied science and history as an undergraduate, and those two sides of my brain, I guess, a little bit. I went to Caltech and got a PhD, and then I joined Chevron a long time ago. And I started in technology, and then I grew up through Chevron running businesses, mostly that had a lot of international flavor to them. And I realized I really like connecting with people. I like understanding how businesses work and like how money gets made. And I guess one example was I lived in London and I was running a lubricants business, and we closed the books on 43 countries every month. And so I was trying to figure out, what does the lubricants business look like in Uganda, and comparing that to Belgium. And it was really interesting because the business models were different, the markets were different and everything. So it gave me a really good understanding of the diversity of businesses and when it translates down to how organizations interact with customers and suppliers and ultimately make some money. In 2013, I got asked to run the Tech Ventures company in Chevron, and I have since added to my title, just making it very difficult for people to introduce me. I still run Technology Ventures, but Vice President of Innovation as well. And it really reflects how Chevron thinks about the role that Tech Ventures plays in the company, which is it's about accessing external innovation. And it's the external innovation, not that come from our current suppliers and incumbent suppliers, but these suppliers that have no past and they're building a future. So it's a unique set of innovators, but it's one thing to invest in those companies and have a relationship, but if you don't ever do anything with them beyond Tech Ventures, Chevron really misses out. So spending a lot of time figuring out how do you integrate into the company, whether it's through use of the technology, whether it's through the learnings we have, whether it's through the practices that the startups are doing in terms of how they're running their business. It's quite a holistic view. So I'll leave it at that. And I've been running the organization for about 8 years. It's probably the best job in Chevron, and maybe through our conversation, you'll find out why.
I actually really like when you finish with it's the best job at Chevron, and I can probably sense why. But let me start from your introduction, because I think you're the first that I interview that have science and history. And I really like when people have very wide interests. So I want to jump on the do no harm, because it's something I have in my mind, especially when we talk about diversity and inclusion. And there are a lot of initiatives and discussions about our role as a VC or CVC to promote that to our portfolio companies. And I find that depending on where they are in their stage, early stage versus late stage, the spectrum of what you can recommend and do is very different. And sometimes taking a too strong stance could actually do harm. And so I wanted to have maybe a granular view from you about how to think about this, especially in terms of doing no harm and yet bringing value to the community and to the ecosystem.
Let me take a stab at that. I think there's a number of things we need to do. It's very clear that we have a lot of issues with equity around the world, right? And we're not going to solve all of them. But in the world that we work in, which is energy innovation, and we're a corporate venture organization, when we look inside our company, when we look to the startups, and when we look at the other co-investors, we've got work to do. And we said diversity around the table from an investor standpoint is important. Diversity within a team is important. And so we guided by how Chevron's thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but then we translate that to the business that we're in and what can we do. And we're going to invest in companies that meet our criteria, and we're going to try to make our aperture as wide as possible and really challenge ourselves on the objectivity of our criteria. And we get some diversity that way, just by the definition. But we're also going to do very intentional things to increase access. So, for example, participating in funds that have a predetermined criteria around a certain type of founder. And because we know that access is not a totally objective criteria in this world, and it starts very early. So that's in parallel to what we're doing is also how do you just increase the amount of deal flow that ultimately venture investors in early, late, mid-late series will have for consideration. So we're trying to front end load, if you will, and we're supporting organizations or funds that have that as a focus and have the capability to do it right. Along the way, we're trying to ensure that we have a very inclusive work location and work and organization, and support the efforts of incubators and accelerators, principally around the country and broader than that, for their efforts. So have supported many of their events and things like that in that area.
Can you share your views about how to say no to entrepreneurs and what others in the community should really think about?
Our whole process, we do investment, use, and strategy, and it's a pipeline, right? So it starts with a very wide aperture and gets narrowed down. So there's places along that pipeline to say yes and no. But in terms of the engagement with the entrepreneur, it starts out with being responsive. It starts out with being clear on what we want and what we're looking for. It also, we do say, we'll take a look at something. But once we say that, that's actually a commitment. And that's a part of a culture, which is if you storm my inbox with cold call everything, I don't have an obligation to answer all of those. But if I tell you I'm going to look at it, then, or I'm going to have the team look at it, because honestly, I have an amazing team. We do most all of the work. Then we have an obligation back. So I think aggressiveness, velocity, and then when, if it doesn't fit our profile, being able to tell people why. I guess that's actually just like being above board and honest with people. So we reinforce that. And it means that we all process a lot of communication back and forth. But I think that's what we do at the front end. I think the other piece is that we tell entrepreneurs, because we work for a really large company, if you want to go out and just work in another part of the company and not really involve us, knock yourself out. We can't help you if you don't come and engage with us. If you continue to, I don't know what the expression is, spray and pray, where you cover all of Chevron with stuff, again, we can't help you. But if you meet us halfway, you understand how we do our work, and we put a little trust in you, you put a little trust in us. Those are just the building blocks of a relationship. And that's what we're trying to build our processes around.
Very nice. What it is that you measure to ensure that this vision is delivered?
You know, some of it's quantitative and some's qualitative. And I like to think that the KPIs are proxies for achieving mission. And you should not hardwire. So of course we look at how much activity you get through the various stages and how many ring the cash register at the end. And I mentioned that we do investment, we do use, we do strategy. And so we look at how much is going successfully through the pipeline, which allows you to have some failures, allows you to look at a lot of stuff. And we look at those things that are adding value to Chevron. We look at, as well as those things that it's more qualitative. What are the strategic insights that are helping us think through that future? And so it's a mix of all of those things. And I guess the one other thing is that the goals for the team or the commitments for the team are such that no one person can do their work in isolation. And that's just the middle child in me coming out that says, guess what? It's going to take all of us. And so we'll have a successful year because of all of us, not just because of any one person.
Very nice. And I think it will be a comfort to the audience that for a CVC that's been going on for more than 20 years and a decade with you, you still have these KPIs that have to be flexible and both not driving the wrong behaviors. You want this to be the outcome of good behaviors.
Yeah. We want the companies to be successful. We want to have a good return on Chevron's investment. But the return is not just the monetary return on the capital we put in. It's the learnings, it's using the technology, it's advancing our learning in a certain space so that we can adopt the technology faster if that's why we've invested. And so we can get too hung up on the numerical number that you would have if you were strictly a financial, and that will change what it is our employees scout for. Yeah. So we have to start with the North Star is Chevron and how we're thinking about adding value today and in the future. And I think we get the right blend, and it's a portfolio. So we get things that have tremendous multiples when they have a liquidity event. And we also get things that are really tough. They're tough to develop, they're tough to scale. It's a hard road, but they're important things for our industry.
And is that when you would compromise a little on the financial expectations if you see something that could have really big strategic value or big impact into the ecosystem?
So we set out our financial expectations with the first initial investment. I don't think any of them ever deliver exactly what we've put in there, right? That's not the game of venture. So we always want them all to be successful. A capitally intensive technology is tough. We need them in our businesses. I think that is one of the areas where corporate venture really plays a good role because we see the use for the stuff because frequently it's in our own operations. And so we wouldn't invest in something that wouldn't make money because the company won't be there. So again, we're not changing Chevron's bottom line by the return on that initial investment. These are options plays, but we want them to be successful and we'll invest in things we think will be successful.
Very nice. I can see you love your job, you love your team, you love the impact you do, and you describe this as the best job in Chevron. But I don't believe this is much. I'm sure that you are doing things to make it the best job. Can you describe maybe for people who are thinking about leading a CVC, or how can they ensure to design it in a way that it becomes the best job ever?
Yeah, I can tell you from where I sit, and I don't have all the answers. I'm still learning, but I'm very fortunate. I work for a company where the CEOs, and in this job, I've worked for 2 CEOs, had the vision and foresight and understanding of what a corporate venture organization could do for the company. It does take senior leadership support because I have a big title, but you could shorten it to say chief disruptor. The one thing I will not make Chevron feel happy about is the status quo. And that's not my job. I can respect the people that are producing every day, but that's not the job I've been asked to do. So I've been asked to change things. So partly is understanding that mindset, building relationships inside the company and external to the company, having people understand why it is you're doing what you're doing, particularly when you're investing in something that it looks like a big, bad, ugly threat to your current business, but you have a vision for where the threats are, but also where the opportunities for Chevron are, and being able to articulate that. So those are some relationship things, and then hire the best people you can. And most of our folks have come from inside of Chevron, so they know the business. We know them before we hire them because we're networking inside the company to find those people that are innately curious and always thinking about, what about this? It's not an easy job, but they're passionate and they want in. So hire good people. I said my job is to keep them happy, but create an opportunity where they can bring forward good ideas and provide a little cover so that they get a chance to nurture those ideas. It's not perfect, but I think all in all, that makes an organization where they don't come in to do a job. I mean, they're on a mission. And when you can work with people that are mission-based and mission-based for the company you work for, and the company you work for more than half your life, I mean, that's just a great work environment to have.
Very nice. Can you tell us how you recruit and how you think about internal recruitment versus external? What was your guidelines?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we do most of the recruiting internal, but for specific, as we've done external. Chevron has this big machine that's a bit of a matching the jobs to the disciplines and so forth. So we try to live within that, but it doesn't work that well for us. Because you can look at someone's job experience, you can even look at what their college degrees are and everything, and that tells you something, but it doesn't tell you enough about what drives them. And what are you curious about? What are you trying to learn about? People don't have to have the right answers for all this, but this has to get them thinking. And so it's a thinking person's game. If they come from the operations, what ideas do they have about where innovation is needed? They have to have a kind of imagine the possibility, improvement mentality. Most of, I would say, the successful folks can deal with ambiguity. When you are going out beyond where the company is right now, every once in a while you want to look back and make sure they're there, but you got to keep going out. So that takes confidence. It takes a willingness to not have everything be black and white and still be able to flourish and be productive in that. A lot of the way we conduct ourselves, we have inside of the company something called the Coalition of the Willing, which is who are those people out in the enterprise that are helping us, whether it's a trial or helping us with a due diligence and so forth, who are really excited about the opportunity to bring new innovation into our operations. They can help us with word of mouth. Some of them want to be part of the team. And so, yeah, it's definitely that type of thing rather than please give me 100 resumes and I'll sort through and find the 25 that are best suited. It doesn't work that way.
Let me ask a question, which maybe I'm partial, but if someone is really proactive reaching out to you to join your team, not through the matchmaking that's organized by your company, but finding ways to keep adding value, does that kind of influence your choice?
Oh, yes, for sure. Because again, the way I've described these things, it's not based on you got the highest GPA in mechanical engineering in said university. That doesn't tell me whether or not when you are confounded by a tough problem, whether you're going to be able to get out there, find all the innovators that are working in that space, develop the trust with them, and bring forward the one that you think is best. There's a lot of both behavioral aspects to that, as well as knowing the domain. You have to have technical chops in these jobs, but that isn't the limit of what you have. And if they can prove that they understand the model and by being helpful, by being part of a project beforehand, the on-ramp will be smoother. And we want people to succeed in these jobs. The on-ramp is always steep. I didn't know how to do this. We are all newbies, if you will, when you come in. But if you get a sense that on-ramp they will be more successful at navigating it, and they're going to get a leg up.
Yeah, actually, the ramp is not just the learning, but some unlearning from things you've learned in the past that may not apply.
Oh, yes, you do need to extricate some practices. That's absolutely right.
So in our last 5 minutes, I want to focus on what you are hopeful for the corporate venturing ecosystem and what you think we should do better as an industry.
The number of corporate venture organizations is growing by leaps and bounds. I think I heard a statistic that half of the corporate ventures did their first deal in the last 12 months. Just amazing, given COVID and everything, that this trend has such an upward slope. What it says is that corporations understand the need for change. What it says is that they understand, maybe in their own words, that they're in a bubble. I think all of those things are positive. So it can be done right or it cannot be done right. And so we have always been willing to share how we do what we do, because having corporate venture organizations out there that don't know how to do it is just damaging for all of us. And so I think the piece that I would encourage people to do is to not think of it just as the strict transactional financial investment. You are strategic. I think that's why your company wants a corporate venture form, to really take that strategy out for a spin and think through, so how do I inform corporate strategy? We actually need to get close to the people that are developing corporate strategy and talk to them. And sometimes as organizations and events come together, where all the corporate ventures come together, it has been mainly focused on the deal. And it hasn't been focused on this integration back into the corporate. The corporate was a funder, but that was it. And I think that misses a lot of the value. Now, I think organizations are getting savvy to this, is how do I then get, I've got this on-ramp into the company. How do I get the on-ramp into the mothership? And I think there's more we can do to talk through how the practice is for that.
Very nice. Now, in the energy space, just to finish the interview, what are you most hopeful about in the next 5 years?
So the challenges of energy are great and they matter. I would take any young person, bright, coming up, I'd try to convince you to go into energy. So the demands for the energy system are very high, and we're frequently disappointed, right? It's not reliable. In many parts of the world, it's not accessible, it's not affordable, and it's got a carbon footprint that's not sustainable. So trying to solve all of those is going to take a lot of money, a lot of talent, a lot of innovation, and then a lot of courage to deploy the technologies and undergo that change. So leadership change is really important. I'm very optimistic that we are on the right track. Things are accelerating. They've been accelerated through COVID. And some of that is through just so much support for the entrepreneurs in this area, but also this understanding that we're going to have to collaborate and partner. I think the caution point or watch point is, if we couldn't have done it yesterday, we better do it today. So our industry has historically not moved fast. And from a safety and execution standpoint, that's absolutely right, because we work in a high-risk environment. But putting off change because we don't think it needs to happen, because we're scared, because we're this, we're that, we're gonna have to find a way through that. So I think the pace of impact and pace of change has to pick up.
I love it. And I think I'm going to invite you to Energy Week 2022 when we set it. So thank you, Barbara. You've been very generous with insights and sharing your journey. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. And any feedback, let me know.